they wish, and they wish, and they wish, and they wish, and they wish.
Family, what's up? We're back, finally, back up in here, man. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna start these reactions back and do some other stuff too. But I merely missed you guys. I'm pretty you guys doing well. I'm pretty all is well. The world is crazy. The world is absolutely nuts. From plane falling from the sky to Drake and Kendrick Lamar. 10% and Kendrick Lamar just really wiping the floor with him. That is mad crazy. At least with that song, with that beat. Now, on the other hand, you got other people that really shows receipts about how ruthless Drake can be behind the scenes. And hence, that's what this video is about. It's about Drake and his ties to the streets. So a lot of people don't give Drake credit for being from the streets because it's a upbringing and all that stuff. But they do a lot of rappers like that. But this particular video shows you basically a bit more of Drake's background, being from Canada and from the streets of Canada, and how he really moved. You know what I'm saying? So let's just check it out and see. We'll stop here and there and give some commentary and go from there. So basically, this video is about Drake's evil street life. So I don't know what OVO meant, but evidently that's Drake's crew. So let's go. That last clip, those young boys don't care. They show up, Swiss cheese. You already know what that means. So let's go ahead and go through. I'm not gonna stop it here. Just let it go through and see exactly how this builds up.
Warning out to Kendrick Lamar.
It's the police.
Now, mind you, all this is in Toronto, Canada. This is Drake's hometown, his turf. Some of the folks he grew up with, you know what I'm saying? So this ain't got to our to the US. I mean, they really doing that out there, you feel me?
In today's age of hip-hop, your image is crucial, and most importantly, your first impression is everything. Like when a rapper is growing a fan base, he first must cultivate an image that validates his music, or else his music simply won't be taken seriously. However, that image isn't always a reflection of reality, especially back in the day. For example, this was Tupac at his rich suburban high school just 2 years before starting to rap.
If you look at the statistics, they're staggering again, and so I think they're scared because they're realizing that they goofed.
Not to mention that the Migos grew up in an upper-class suburban family along with Lotto, Tyga, Lil Yachty, and basically every Atlanta rapper ever. My point is that because all these rappers came into fame with this fake image already cultivated, the fans bought into it and they avoided the corny wannabe perceptions. Basically, when your image is perfected and your first impression is on point, the fans want to believe you. However, when it comes to Drizzy Drake, he is the poster child for soft and pretending to be something he's not. The first reason is of course because he was famous in acting before he started rapping, but really this shouldn't matter at all, because Tupac was an actor before rapping as well, and nobody holds that against him. But I think the biggest difference and most important reason is that Drake is
Tupac was, yeah. I used to be a really huge Tupac fan, and when he passed away, I was really sad. But then social media, the internet, everything became more prevalent. And you got a chance to find out a lot of things about these so-called celebrities, the stars that you look up to. And back in the day, you used to say, you never want to meet your hero. Well, you never want to meet your idol. You never want to meet the person you really look up to in person because they're always somebody else. So it's kind of that's kind of how I am with Tupac, because, the industry is crazy. They make these rappers do all sorts of things, and a lot of it is not good. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of times they do it just to get that bag. So that's kind of how I feel about Tupac right now. But may the Lord rest his. I pray he rested in peace.
is from Canada.
No. We are polite. We are Canadians.
Yes. In everyone's mind, Canada is some paradise land where everyone is wealthy, no violence ever occurs, and street activities don't exist. So given that, Drake must be soft and all of his homies are jokes. Now of course, both of these takes are rooted in American ignorance, plain and simple. It's very hard as an American to take anything Canadian seriously, I must admit. And my goodness,
the accent doesn't help, Grody.
But as you'll see in this video, all of these opinions are absolute nonsense. Firstly, Toronto is no vacation, and secondly, Drake's crew is one of the most dangerous and wicked crews in all of hip-hop. And believe it or not, but I'm willing to say that Drake's crew is more dangerous than his rivals in Compton. Yep, in this video, you'll see why OVO is nothing to play with. But before we get into it, let me run the intro.
Alright, y'all check out Swamp Stories, where I got this from.
The story begins in 1984 when a Canadian English teacher named Sandy would meet a soul musician named Dennis from Memphis, Tennessee. The two would meet at a bar in Toronto where Dennis was performing, and it was basically kind of a random interaction.
We met in Toronto. I was in Toronto playing drums with Jerry Lee Lewis, and Sandy was at our show, and I was looking for a pack of cigarettes, and she was standing there at the bar when I asked the bartender where could I find cigarettes. So she said, "Here, have one of mine." And that's how it started.
Long story short, the two would hit it off, Dennis would move to Toronto, they'd get married, and they'd have a kid in 1986. This would of course be a son named Aubrey Drake Graham, their only child. Now it sounds like everything was peaches and cream, but in reality that wasn't the case at all. With Dennis being a low-scale musician and Sandy being an English teacher, money wasn't easy to come by. And as a result of this, the couple raised Aubrey in an affordable part of the city known as Weston. For those who are unfamiliar, Weston has an over 70% immigrant population, with 34% of which being black. Statistically, this would make Weston the blackest city in California, and I only say that to say that Drake grew up in a very diverse environment. On top of this, the family's financial struggles would get even worse after a divorce and when Dennis moved back to Memphis. Now, a young Aubrey would no longer have a father present from the age of 6, and to make matters worse, his father would go to prison. This was no easy task for Sandy, but thankfully her community and family would step in to help. Because of his grandmother and help from the synagogue, he was able to attend private school and have a very strong education. In addition to this, his family was able to save enough money to move out of Weston and into the upscale Forest Hill neighborhood.
Enough about the car. Let's go inside. Hey, Bubby. Yeah. Me and my grandma have a little thing where my mom doesn't let her eat chocolate, but my grandma slides me a little extra cheddar on the side, and I make sure she gets her daily chocolate dosage.
That's my grandson.
Yeah, Aubrey's life was turning out pretty good, and on top of this, he would find his first passion in high school. Long story short, while acting in a school play, an agent would discover him and put him on. So at 15 years old, Aubrey would get a major role on the hit TV show Degrassi.
One warning though, you stay away from my girl.
Things were going great, but at 18 years old, he realized that acting wasn't his true passion and his heart was no longer in it. Deep down, he wanted to be a rapper. Oh, hell nah, is what everyone around him was thinking. But after studying the likes of Jay-Z, The Clips, Mac Dre, and more, he was certain that he could make it happen.
Alright, pause. Man, just having that self-awareness of what you want to do, having that confidence in what you want to do and going for it is a W all day, everything. Me at my age, I'm still having trouble trying to figure out what's going on with me. And it's just at that young age, just being able to make up your mind, that's commendable. Commendable.
So every night he'd sneak into the studio on set and record songs all night long. At first it was definitely rough, but he was persistent and he kept getting better and better. Basically, he spent every single night in the studio to the point where it began affecting his performance in acting, and the directors knew that something was up. Well, long story short, he no longer cared about his acting career, as now music was destined to be his future. Without telling a soul, he was in the midst of creating a rap career under the simple name of Drake. Then in 2006, out of nowhere, he would release his debut mixtape, Room for Improvement. The mixtape, although not a Picasso, would sell 6,000 copies, cultivating a local buzz in Toronto. This was enough to catch the attention of some major artists like Trey Songz, Lupe Fiasco, and more. But most importantly, Jazz Prince, the son of the infamous music mogul Jay Prince, would run across Drake on MySpace and see major potential. From here, he would fly him to Houston, sign him to his label, link him with Lil Wayne, and the rest is history.
Wow.
We were introduced through another gentleman from Houston. His name is Jazz Prince. Found me on MySpace and loved my music on MySpace. And he was like, man, I know Lil Wayne, and I'm gonna play him your music one day. And I was just like, yeah, right. You know, like, you never really. We would talk, and he called me one day, and I was in the barbershop getting my hair cut, and he was like, yo. And I was like, friend. And he's like, yo, what's up, it's Weezy. He was like, I'm starting this thing called Young Money, and I'd really love for you to be a part of it. So I want to fly you out to Houston and meet you. And he did just that the day after, and that formed our relationship. And I was like this quiet kid in the corner of the bus, you know?
As we all know, over the next couple of years, Drake would become the biggest thing in hip-hop. And this major superstar fame would bring a lot of pride to his hometown of Toronto, as he was breaking new barriers for what Canadian rappers can do. This, of course, must feel amazing, you know, gaining the admiration from your own region. But unfortunately, there's also major downsides to being a famous rapper as well. To put it simply, a lot of people from the hoods and trenches of Toronto were jealous that somebody like Drake would represent their city.
Like, okay, so you're telling me this Canadian Jew child actor is gonna be what? Is gonna be like someone that we say is in our top 5, top 10, whatever. It's like, it was a hard sell.
Like, damn, the child actor from Forest Hill is gonna be the rapper who represents us and he's the one who made it? Nah, let's do something to him.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
And
that's crazy that people that really have nothing to do with your success. They don't feed you, they don't do anything for you. They just exist in your neighborhoods or in your environments. And you have a say in what I do and how I succeed, and why get jealous? I don't understand. So far, from what I get from Drake, he is very determined, very, very, very admirable. I mean, I love just the mentality, just to go out and go get it, and you know exactly what you want. Sometimes the people are put in place, but for those people that are put in place, they still have to work their butt out to get it. So, man, okay, interesting story so far.
When Drake encounters his first problems in the wicked streets of Toronto. May 15th, 2009. It's a Friday night in Toronto, and Drake has a night out with his beautiful date named Chantel. Together, the two ride out in the back of a Maybach.
Chantel? Chantel's bad now. Chantel had a TV show herself. You remember Chantel? I forget the name of it. The Chantel family or something? The family of Chantel, that's what it is. And she was married to the guy from Dominican Republic. She's a baddie. I mean, straight up. Straight up. Here we go.
Back on the way to a fancy restaurant. Riding high off his career success, Drake is rocking a $100,000 AP watch, an iced out chain given to him by Lil Wayne, and $4,000 cash in his pocket. Long story short, they go out to dinner, have a good time, and at 9 p.m. they hop back in the Maybach. As they await the driver to take off, boom, a handgun is pressed against Drake's window. Oh shit, one man demands that Drake roll down his window while his friend stands in front of the car armed, pointed at the driver. They demand that Drake takes off his watch, his chain, and hands over everything in his pocket. So with no real choice, Drake gives up everything, including his prized Lil Wayne chain. After he gives it all up, the men spring back to their car, not knowing that Toronto police were already alerted and are just around the corner. So as soon as the robbers take off in their car, Toronto police are right on their trail. Thankfully, they're able to corner them in up the street, and Drake gets everything back.
Wow.
While being the civilian that he is, Drake tells police exactly what happened, and the two guys are arrested. Now, does this make Drake a snitch? No. No? Okay, fine. Yes, it does, but who cares? What's most important is that he wasn't hurt, he got his stuff back, and he decided to move different for the rest of his career. He was understandably shaken up by the incident, as he would tell the New York Times that I feel unsafe in Toronto at all times. On top of this, he believed that this wasn't a random or isolated incident. He believed that he was set up by a gang. My chain was tucked the entire night and I had a big coat on covering my watch. They didn't ask for anything but those 2 items. On top of this, my date had an expensive purse and a bunch of jewelry, and they didn't ask for any of that. How the hell did they know I had a chain on and a nice watch? And most importantly, why didn't they ask for anybody else's stuff? Regardless of all that, getting robbed in your own city as the face of the city must not feel great. Not to mention that something like this could easily end a rap career. So Drake was understandably furious, and he was gonna make sure that this could never happen again. He knew that he desperately needed some muscle in Toronto. In the States, he had the protection of guys like Jay Prince and Birdman, and in Toronto, he needed that level of street power as well, or even more.
So here in the U.S., he had, of course, those days, Jay Prince, Cash Money, Young Money, all those guys. So they did give him a little street credit. And of course, he went to Atlanta at some point. But to go back home and get it, watch the next part of the story. It's going to get even crazier.
So now we enter the chapter of Drake's very first Canadian gang ties. That introduces us to a man named Nacelle Beezer, also known as Chubbs, a native of Toronto's Scarborough district. Chubbs is a big dude, and in Scarborough he had a reputation for being a bully in the streets. While Chubbs and Drake would meet through mutual friends very early in his career, but Drake honestly thought nothing of it. He heard that Chubbs was a respected member of a local gang, but why would he need to be around something like that? Well, then comes the scary robbery incident, and Drake now knew that having goons on his side might be a good idea. So after the incident, the first person that he called was Chubbs, and just like that, they locked in. This now meant that Drake had some serious firepower in the streets, and if you don't believe me, let me introduce you to Chubbs' gang. The Galloway Boys, also known as G-Way, were founded in the 1990s in Toronto's Scarborough district. The Galloway Boys were mostly of Jamaican descent, but it was more so a matter of neighborhood versus ethnic background. They obviously claimed the Galloway neighborhood, but more specifically the various housing projects in the region. Well, at first, the crew was known for being hustlers, stacking millions through illicit imports, and moving weight throughout Canada. Essentially, they rose from dirt poverty as first-generation immigrants to the coolest guys in Toronto with Mercedes, Beamers, chains, and of course the women. And if you know anything about Toronto women, they're worth risking your life for, I promise you. Well, as far as operating money in the streets, things would go pretty smoothly for the Galloway Boys for the first decade. There were no rivals or really any competition in the neighborhood, so their only worry was ducking the feds. But then came the early 2000s, when they got cocky and started to expand a little too far into the wrong hood. Around the year 2001, the Galloway Boys got greedy and attempted to start moving weight in the infamous Orton Park housing projects. And these specific projects, well, they were already occupied by the infamous Orton Park gang. Clearly, G-Way didn't take Orton seriously at all, and this resulted in their very first consequence of the Toronto streets. October 10th, 2002, 1:30 p.m. It's a regular day in the life of G-Way's leader named Norris Allen as he's patrolling around G-Way territory like any other day. But little does he know the Orton boys are on a mission to send a message to stop coming to their hood. They want to cut the head off the snake. Well, at 1:40 p.m, Norris decides to hop in his car to head off and head out of the hood. But coincidentally, at this exact time, the Norris boys pull up and walk up right to his car. They look at him and without hesitation, they start blowing. This was a major blow to the streets of Toronto, but more importantly to the Galloway Boys. Norris was their leader, and for Orton Park to eliminate him just like that was disrespectful in the worst way. So now G-Way, who had never been in beef before, had a major choice to make. We can either accept defeat and just own up to the fact that going into their territory is what caused this, or we can stand up to them and go for retaliation. And unfortunately, the Galloway Boys would choose the latter. However, at first, they were simply not ready. These guys were hustlers, not steppers, and frankly, the whole gang didn't even own firearms. So step number one was getting some BAM machines. And in order to do this, they began hijacking shipments of BAMs coming across the Canadian border. And just like that, by 2003, Ontario police say that the Galloway boys had enough high-powered ammunition to take down a small army. Damn. This was serious, and they were destined to get revenge for their beloved leader. When I say they, I'm really talking about their new leader, Tyshawn Riley, who organized a group of dedicated steppers called the Throwbacks. Right away, G-Way's Throwbacks started stepping, eliminating Orton Park members left and right. Even the leader, Tyshawn himself, was stepping. He was dedicated to find.
That's how things got out of control. You have the retaliation. That's never good. That's never good. And it looks like a new leader. He was about that life for real, without even no compromise.
Finding an op, and sadly, this would be his downfall. That takes us to March 11th, 2004. It's a regular day in G-Way's hood, and Tyshawn is driving up Nielsen Road, the same street where their former leader lost his life. Because of this, he's already angry and bloodthirsty, and as he approaches the red light of Finch Avenue, he looks into an SUV right next to him. For whatever reason, he believes that the men in the SUV are Orton Park members and that they're sliding through his territory. So without hesitation, he simply rolls his window down, and sadly, the rest is history. It was so intimidating in their community that no one would dare go against them. Eventually, police would solve the case, but for the next few months, Tyshawn was still out and about. You'd think that after doing something so evil, your guilt would eat you up. Like, I can't believe I just claimed the life of a random person who didn't deserve it. Maybe I should start seeking forgiveness and leave this lifestyle alone. On top of this, you think that you'd want to lay low and do your best to stay off the radar, right? Well, nope, not for Tyshawn and G-Way, as even after this incident, they were still determined to target Orton Park rivals. So just a month later, Tyshawn himself would target the two that he believed claimed the life of Norris Allen. He would drive by himself into the Orton Park projects and simply just start letting it blow. And just like that, a bloodbath would jump off that Toronto had never seen before. In fact, Toronto's homicide detective Wayne Banks believes that Tyshawn escalated everything.
Okay, guys, I know this is about Drake, but all this is relevant. I promise. He's gonna swing back around and give you how this connects with Drake. So you guys, thanks for your patience.
And he describes him as the purest form of evil with no regard for human life. And yes, this is the exact sentiment that Scarborough natives would use to describe G-Way. Just a purely evil organization with no regard for anyone's lives. Well, thankfully, a month after this, Tyshawn would be arrested and sentenced to life in prison. However, regardless of his arrest, what he kicked off was simply unstoppable. His new generation of G-Way were ruthless, and unfortunately after this, it was body for body for body for body.
Gunshots ring out in this quiet Scarborough neighborhood. Toronto paramedics say one man was found dead here at the scene, another transported to hospital.
It's those people that start shooting. They were just running. This one girl said she was seeing people that's dropping behind her.
There was some type of a confrontation with Mr. Walker, and shortly after that confrontation, Mr. Ford was shot dead.
The former hustlers were now headhunters, and on top of this, their membership was growing every single year. And of course, to tie this back around to Drake, one of the new members was Chubbs, who allegedly gained a high rank within the gang. For doing what? Well, word on the streets is that he was an absolute crash out. And most importantly, by the time he became friends with Drake, he had enough say-so to get things done, if you know what I mean. So this is who Drake began running with after he was robbed, and honestly, he was thrown into the middle of a gang war that he had no idea how to maneuver. So yes, having them on his side did make him more powerful, but it also made him a serious target. As you would imagine, Orton Park seeing the biggest rapper in the world hanging out with their ops must not be a good feeling. Like, oh, you want to take sides in our politics? Okay, well you're an op too. And to make matters worse, when Drake started hanging with G-Way was the exact time that their war sparked right back up. In fact, upon Drake's arrival happened to be G-Way's most wicked period ever. And the guys that Drake was hanging out with on a daily basis were simultaneously doing serious damage in the Toronto streets. These would be guys like Ramon Williams and Adham Kamis, G-Way members known for being absolute crash outs. Now we'll get back to them in a second, and you'll see why they're important. but for the meantime, let's focus back on Drake. We're now in 2011 and Drake's career is evolving from like a love song R&B singer rapper to an attempted new image. An image of a rapper who should be taken seriously on the mic and also in the streets as well. I think it was an attempt to ditch the emotional soft rapper image to a more street adjacent character. 2011, he kinda starts rapping crazy on the tracks, and at first people were laughing at it, like, really? And if you can remember, it all peaked with his hit song headlines.
Tuck my napkin in my shirt cause I'm just mobbing like that. You know good and well that you don't want a problem like that. You gon' make someone around me catch a body like that. No, don't do it. Please don't do it, cause one of us goes in and we all go through it. And Drizzy got the money, so Drizzy gon' pay it. Those my brothers, I ain't even gotta say it. That's just something they know.
The bold lyrics made everyone laugh, including me. Like, what a joke, this Canadian rapper talking about someone around him catching bodies? Come on. Even Charlemagne the God would clown him for this on the radio.
Corny guy. Like, he's just a corny dude. In that new Headlines video, he looks extra corny. It's like, Drake, why are you thugging now? Why are you dressed all in black? Why you got on black gloves? Why you got a whole bunch of dudes around you dressed in black? And he has the most non-threatening looking goons I've ever seen in my life. Like, seriously, like they look like a flash mob that's about to run up in H&M and take everything. Like, none of them look like a threat. He has the most non-threatening looking goons I've ever seen in my life. None of them look like a threat.
It don't matter. That's the killer right there. Where you at? Let me show you. Yeah. Anyway, he over here. I can't get to come over. But everybody can pull that trigger. And if you don't care about life or having to live for, that's it. That's just what it's all about.
Little did he know, most of these goons in the video are certified G-Way members who literally were during this time out sliding in the streets of Toronto.
The Toronto police say there's recently been a resurgence of the once notorious gang. And the young thugs who are running G-Way these days, just like their predecessors, are packing firearms and they're not afraid to use them.
In particular, two of these would be the guys I mentioned earlier, Adham and Ramon, and these guys, well, you'll see. That takes us to September 4th, 2011. By this point, the G-Way vs. Orton Park beef has split up most of Toronto, basically causing two sides to the city. For most people, this would be really bad news, but for G-Way, they were happy because now they had more people to slide on. And on this day, Ramon happens to see somebody who they just started beefing with post their location at a local Domino's. So literally for no reason at all, Ramon and Adham hop in their car and go slide to the Domino's. At 5:30, they spin around the block to see if they're still there, and unfortunately they have no squabbling on their minds. Instead, at 5:45, they stop their car outside and they start absolutely dumping into the Domino's. Glass shatters everywhere and everyone jumps down to the ground to take cover. 3 men are injured in the incident, but thankfully they survive after being rushed to the hospital. Still though, this was an absolutely insane idea by the G-Way members to just start blowing out of Domino's. What in the world? These guys are the literal definition of crash outs, like there's no squabbling going on for G-Way. Well, either way, after doing this, you'd think that these guys would want to duck low and stay out of the way of Toronto police, you know, leave the street life alone for the meantime. But nope, just 2 months later, Ramon would crash out again. And that takes us to November 4th, 2011, 11 p.m. It's nighttime in Scarborough and Ramon is trapping like any other night. In particular, he has a random customer named Daniel Fuller coming through to cop. And at 11:15, Daniel arrives, hops in Ramon's car, and they go through to discuss the deal. But somehow out of nowhere, the simple interaction turns into an argument where Ramon gets furious and belligerent with Daniel. And unfortunately for no reason, Ramon whips out and starts unleashing. Daniel is rushed to the hospital where he thankfully survives, however he is paralyzed for life. Sadly, this was yet another example of the senseless violence caused by the Galloway boys. But thankfully, Toronto police would put their best foot forward and arrest them for all of their crimes. Still though, the point is that while Drake and all his goons are being clowned for, you know, being soft and all that, they were actually in the field catching bodies and causing havoc. Oh, and believe me, it gets much worse. December 30th, 2011. It's 11 in the morning in Orton Park, and a young man is leaving his apartment on his way to the bus stop. This would be Dimitri Barnaby, a 24-year-old who has no gang affiliations whatsoever. He just so happens to live in Orton Park. Well, unfortunately, on this exact morning, G-Way members are rolling around Orton Park looking for rivals. And at 11:15, they happen to spot Dimitri leaving his building headed for the bus stop. For whatever reason, they assume that he's affiliated with the rivals, and they instantly target him. Sadly, 2 G-Way members hop out of an SUV and run him down. This was yet another case of mistaken identity at the hands of G-Way, a sick continuous trend from the evil crew. Unfortunately, over the next couple of years, it would only get worse and worse. You know, shooting after shooting after shooting after shooting. But then, thankfully, in 2014, Toronto police would take them down in a major way.
In the fall of 2011, during a 4-month period, number 43 Division saw a significant increase in the number of shooting incidents between 2 groups identified as the Galloway Boys Gang and the Orton Park Gang, who attempted to occupy control of that area or turf.
In conclusion, 41 G-Way members were arrested, resulting in the complete dissemination of their gang. It was all over. Well, at least for the meantime. And pertaining to Drake, well, this meant that his power in the streets went all the way down. All of those G-Way members who he used to run with and would be in his music videos, well, all those guys were now locked in the feds. Actually, I shouldn't say all, because the one guy who was the closest to Drake somehow ducked the indictment. This, of course, would be Chubbs, Drake's #1 enforcer, and really the only reason he was connected to G-Way. Well, after the scary indictment and almost losing his #1 enforcer, Drake would move forward to disassociate Chubbs from the gang life and instead introduce him to the OVO life. This meant that he would hire him as full-time security, shout him out on Instagram, and even mention him in a bunch of songs. Although he was known in the Toronto streets, in America, nobody took Chubbs seriously. But then, all that would be put to bed in the summer of 2014. That takes us to June 12th, 2014. It's a regular Thursday night for Drake as he's recording music in his Calabasas mansion. It's just him, Chubbs, and a sound engineer kicking it when Drake has the idea to invite over a famous producer. This is when Drake allegedly texts the producer named Detail, who's known for working with Lil Wayne, Birdman, Ashanti, Bone Thugs and Harmony, and more. Well, obviously, given the opportunity to work with Drake, Detail drops what he's doing in a heartbeat and flocks over to Drake's Calabasas mansion. At 9 p.m., he arrives to the gated community, is let in the gate, and drives up to Drake's mansion. He then walks up to the front door, truly excited for the opportunity to work with Drake. This is when Chubbs opens the front door, lets him in, and then out of nowhere just starts swinging on him. Boom, bam, blow. He shatters his jaw into pieces and knocks him down to the floor. And according to Detail himself, Drake stands right there, looks at him, and does nothing to help. So now with a broken jaw and disoriented, Detail stumbles out of the house, gets into his car, and drives himself to the hospital. There, as he's awaiting surgery, he sits back and wonders, what the hell just happened? Why would Drake invite me over for his bodyguard to beat the shit out of me, and then he just standing there like he set it up? It makes no sense. Like, did I do something to Drake that pissed him off, or was this just his bodyguard Chubbs acting a fool? What was it? To this day, we still don't know the specifics, but either way, Detail would hit Drake with a massive lawsuit. So yeah, this is how Chubbs started to gain his reputation in the industry. A big old bully who does not play about his boss Drizzy Drake. So now you can see that Drake was kind of moving like the mafia. In LA or everywhere he went, he had Chubbs, and then when he goes to Houston, he's got mob ties, in Louisiana, he's got Birdman, and the list goes on. Basically, he was well protected with real street connections in the States, but in Toronto, it was a whole different story. After the 2014 G-Way takedown, Drake was a major target in Toronto for 2 reasons. Number 1 is that he no longer had any street muscle or any protection, as G-Way was now completely weakened. And secondly, because he chose G-Way's sides in the beef, the people who they were rivals with wanted Drake as well. You know, as the saying goes, take a picture with them ops and get froze with them. By choosing G-Way's side, you put a battery in their back by giving them shoutouts and OVO chains, basically forcing their rivals to see you as one of them as well. So to Orton Park, the Malvern boys, and everyone else who was beefing with G-Way, they wanted to do something to Drake. Now Drake naturally recognized this, and he now knew that he needed more protection in the streets. And in late 2014, he would thankfully meet another crew full of crash outs, this time in the most random way possible. It's the annual OVO Bounce Tournament in Toronto where Drake organizes a team full of NBA players and friends to play against the best local talent. And on this day, star players like Brandon Jennings, Lou Williams, Tristan Thompson, and Jordan Clarkson are playing on Team OVO. Well, the atmosphere in the building is electric as the teams keep going back and forth despite the talent level difference. It even gets to a point where Brandon Jennings is cooking so hard that he takes his shirt off and throws it into the crowd. Then right after, the guy who's guarding him scores on him and takes his shirt off as well and throws it into the crowd. This would be a known local hooper in Toronto named Hassan Ali, and after doing this, the crowd would go absolutely nuts. Eventually, the OVO team full of NBA players wins, but either way, it was a legendary night. Just like that, Ali was a local sensation by the name of Shirt Off Shawty. Now to us, this all seems kinda corny, but Drake was so impressed that he actually went up to talk to him after the game.
Yo, Brody, you're cooking out there on the court. Who are you? What's your name? Where are you from?
Top 5 is ecstatic. The biggest rapper in the world is showing him attention, and he decides to seize the opportunity. He tells Drake that he's an upcoming rapper by the name of Top 5, and of course Drake is probably like,
alright, I don't want to hear about that.
Yet another struggling rapper trying to get me to put them on. I don't want to hear it. But little does Drake know, not only is Top 5 a struggle rapper and raw basketball player, but he's also a known stepper for a dangerous Toronto gang. This would be the Go Get 'Em gang, also known as GGG, a wicked crew of crashouts that's upcoming in the streets. Basically, they claim 3 neighborhoods as their own: Jane, Lawrence Heights, and Driftwood, an area known as the Jungle. And for those who aren't familiar, this is pretty much the worst area of Toronto, known for all the blah, blah, blah.
This is crazy. I mean, we had gangs like back in the day. We was like 30, 40 years ago. And just to hear that Canada has those type of gangs now, or just within the last few years, is crazy. And youngsters claiming territory, and they serious about that. And then the other part is Dre orchestrating it as far as his security and to give him street cred, and it's crazy. It's crazy he even thinking like that, but he is.
Well, once Drake learns of this, he starts watering at the mouth. Please get me in contact with Top 5. I need to talk to him. I heard he's a stepper and his gang is full of crashouts. Please get me in contact with them. So just like that, Drake brings Top 5 into OVO and adopts him as one of his crew members. And immediately, he even shouts his hood out with a song called Jungle. So if you didn't know what that was about, now you do.
I am Drake Shooter. You don't know Broski's in Drake's ball league, eh? He's the starting shooting guard, man.
And on top of this, Drake would constantly shout out Top 5 on Instagram, completely elevating his status. Now obviously, adding Top 5 and GGG to OVO's arsenal did help their street muscle, but it also put them in the middle of a brutal gang war. And this would only add to the list of Toronto gangs who hate Drake by association. So yes, while it was more street muscle for Drake, it was also more ops added to the list. Yes, at this time, GGG were at it with the Falstaff Crips, a dangerous gang claiming 3 projects on Falstaff Avenue. As you'll see, this beef is wicked, and if you don't believe me, that takes us to GGG's very first skit. May of 2015. It's a regular day in the life of a Falstaff Crip member named Shamarky Wyatt, also known as Marky Bands. Marky is known in Toronto for stepping on his rivals, particularly GGG, and stacking his money up. Basically, he's a rich crashout who allegedly did a lot of damage to GGG. So much damage that he figured that it would be best to leave Toronto and to lay low for the rest of time. And when I say leave Toronto, I don't mean going to a suburb or even a city in the vicinity. Instead, Marky moved to the furthest possible place he could while staying in Canada. That takes us to the small town of Fort McMurray, one of the most northern and remote towns on Earth. 5 hours away from the nearest city, this town is not for the weak. On top of this, it has a subarctic climate, meaning long, blistering winters where the temperatures range from -20 to 5 degrees. A town where you won't see the sun for months on end, and doctors warn that if you stand outside for more than 30 seconds, you can get frostbite and hypothermia. So yeah, this is where Marky Bands moved, all in order to allegedly duck GGG. It would take over 28 hours of brutal driving from Toronto to reach him, so realistically, it's not realistic. However, GGG was serious about Get Back, so making this long trip was not out of the question. And on May 24th, 2015, a group of GGG members decide to make the trip. For 2 days, they stay on the road with nothing but revenge on their minds. The long trip through various provinces finally comes to an end on May 26th around 3 in the morning. And as soon as they arrive, they waste no time at all, as somehow they know exactly where Marky Bands lives. Probably a female. So at 4 in the morning, after getting food from the gas station, they mask up, blick up, and head to his apartment. At 4:15, the members stop their car in front of his building, and 3 of them get out and walk up to his unit. They knock on his door hard and wake him up out of his sleep. Obviously, Marquis thinks it's some sort of emergency, so he goes to open up the door. And right there, that's when he's met with the masked up GGG members. Bam! This was truly Mission Impossible. In no way, shape, or form did Marky Bands ever expect them to come that far to get him. GGG were proving to be a different breed, and this is who Drake was now running with. Thankfully though, just 2 weeks later on June 8th, GGG would be raided in Toronto, and what police would find would shock them. They found millions of dollars cash in their stash house, along with a whole lot of straps. And after running the ballistics on these weapons, police were able to tie the 4 GGG members to 4 separate deadly shootings between May 12th and May 26th. These dudes were wicked, and thankfully they were taken off the streets forever. But again, this is who Drake was publicly running with. You know, just reminding you of that. But either way, for Falstaff, this was their biggest loss, as Marquis was their top dog. So now, of course, they desperately wanted revenge on GGG. However, for the meantime, that was simply impossible. The 4 responsible members were now locked up, and Top 5, he was out in Calabasas with Drake. Basically, Falstaff had nobody left to target, as Top 5 was out with Drizzy Drake living his best life. Well, eventually, Falstaff would get frustrated and begin resulting to the worst possible revenge. At this point, GGG are full of themselves and they think that they're completely untouchable. I mean, in the streets they caught 4 consecutive bodies, and outside of it they're running with Drake, so obviously they feel like they're on top of the world. Oh, and not to mention that the members who didn't get indicted are pretty much all in LA living around Drake. So in their minds, they pretty much exited the beef with Falstaff. It's like, you can't reach us, and the members who did something, well, they're all in jail. Well, Falstaff was not okay with this, and basically they were like, come back to Toronto to beef, or we're gonna target somebody very close to you. And that introduces us to Top 5's little brother by the name of Saeed Ali, also known as Foolish. Unlike Top 5, Foolish was not interested in the streets at all. Instead, he was all about basketball. He was a great player in high school and college, and after graduating, he dedicated his time to making sure his youngest brother could make it to the league. Yes, Top 5 and Foolish's youngest brother was so good that he broke Canada's all-time high school record.
Hoop dreams are coming true in Toronto after a high school basketball player hit rare air. Point guard Ahmed Ali led his team to victory this week, becoming just the 2nd Canadian player ever to score more than 100 points in a game. Ahmed Ali of the John Poliani CI Jaguars is joining me now in studio. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. That was a night I can't forget.
Was the adrenaline just pumping?
Like, I was in the zone. Like, I don't. When my family was there too, and like the neighborhood, like I consider them family, and I don't know what to say. Like, I was out of words, and I seen them cheering every shot I was hitting.
So yeah, Foolish was dedicating his time to helping his little brother, and this was his excuse to not be in the streets or involved with GGG at all. But sadly, after Top 5 and the GGG members would leave Toronto, Foolish would become the next biggest target. July 30th, 2017. It's a quiet Sunday night as Foolish is walking to his local market like any other night. He walks to the market, buys a bag full of groceries, and then turns around and begins walking home. Little does he know, at this exact time, Falstaff members are spinning the block. Then at 11 p.m. as he's approaching Dufferin Street, a car pulls right beside him. They roll their window down, they begin yelling at the man, and then when they see him turn around, they realize exactly who it is. Oh my goodness, it's Top 5's little brother. So sadly, without hesitation, they begin blowing. This was the blow of all blows for Top 5, his little brother gone for no reason just like that. And to make matters worse, an alleged Falstaff member named Clutch would constantly go online and make fun of Foolish. He would allegedly post videos on his stories stepping on grocery bags over and over and over. So as you would expect, Top 5 was devastated, hurt, and angry all at the same time. Despite now living the good life in LA with Drake, Top 5 now had an itch to get revenge for his brother. First, the man who trolled Foolish would lose his life while walking in his project.
And the life they took him away. Yeah.
A mother in grief after the death of her 16-year-old son in the apartment building where they lived. She says she heard the gunshots.
Every time I come out my hallway, when I see the stairway he died, you know, I feel something and my heart is bumping, I'm shaking.
Last Thursday, Hanad Abdullahi was gunned down in an apartment at 30 Falstaff Avenue.
Hanad was a good kid. He had so much life, so much ambition, so many things to look forward to. And his life was cut short, all because he lives here.
In a community that has seen shootings before, today residents outside 30 Falstaff expressed frustration at what they say was a slow response by security.
They have been telling me exactly that it took that hour to the police to arrive.
Whether or not Top 5 had anything to do with this, we don't know, but what we do know is that GGG were on a mission to avenge the loss of Foolish. So I guess it's safe to say that this was GGG's get back.
Yep, we better get back.
But for him, no amount of revenge was ever enough, and sadly, he would take it way too far. That takes us to January 30th, 2021. It's a freezing cold Saturday night in Toronto, and Top 5 is back in town. And on this night, he has no plans of kicking back or turning up. Instead, he wants to put in work. It's time to get some more revenge, so at 5 p.m. he gets picked up by his friend named Emmanuel. He hops in his gray Mercedes, and allegedly this is when he begins planning a hit. Then together they head to the ops territory, the 20, 30, and 40 blocks of Falstaff Avenue. They spin around the blocks for over an hour looking for rivals, but they don't see a soul outside. Top 5 is now increasingly frustrated, so he comes up with a second plan. He allegedly tells the driver to drop him off, let him run through the projects, and then he's gonna text him to tell him where to pick him up. So at 8:45, Top 5 hops out and begins walking through the ops section. Then finally at 9 p.m. he sees somebody walk out of a building and instantly he's on him. So he allegedly walks up to the man and makes a terrible decision. He then texts the driver to pull around the building, he runs to the car, and they drive back to his apartment. He thinks he just scored on a Falstaff member, but sadly that's not the case at all. Yet another case of mistaken identity in the streets of Toronto. Hashim was not a member at all, instead just a regular student who happened to live in the projects.
Alright, I'm confused. Why the fuck y'all can't hit the right people? All these innocent bystanders. Y'all just shooting at random. This is the craziest thing ever. This is crazy. So another innocent person got hit. That's crazy. These kids just want to hit somebody.
I'm not exactly sure whether Top 5 cared or not, because the rivals did do the same thing to his brother. Either way, this was a major case in Toronto and police would eventually figure it out. They would officially issue an arrest warrant for Top 5, and this is when he decided to go on the run. He was now ducking US Marshals while running around the city of Los Angeles. He's like, peace, catch me if you can, and of course they would eventually catch him. On October 7th, 2021, he'd eventually be arrested by the Los Angeles SWAT team. And in everyone's mind, Top 5 was completely cooked. Now as a result of this, you'd think that Drake would want to completely distance himself from Top 5, at least publicly. But nope, instead he would buy him the most expensive lawyer in Canada by the name of Gary Grill. Regardless, this seemed like an impossible case to beat. They had his location through his phone, they had a motive, and of course they had all of the self-incriminating social media posts. Yeah, this is why everyone assumed that he would definitely be locked up for life, and you'll see, but we'll get there. In the meantime, let's focus back on Drake and what this all means for him. Now without his self-proclaimed top shooter and G-Way and GGG being locked up, Drake now has no protection in Toronto. Or at least that's what it seemed like from the outside looking in. Now, if he decided to stay in LA full time, this really wouldn't matter, but Drake really wanted to go back to Toronto. By this time, he had already invested millions of dollars into his new beautiful mansion, so now he was committed to living full time in the 6, meaning that he needed some real muscle in the streets. And little did people know, Drake still had one crew left that was rocking behind him. And just like that, we're introduced to Drake's final, but probably most prominent gang ties in Toronto. That introduces us to Reps Up, which really isn't a classic gang. Instead, it's a collection of various hoods in Toronto, united to cause massive damage in the streets. Headed by crash-outs like Drake's close friends Fif and Baka, these guys are nothing to play with. And as far as Drake's connection to them, well, everyone believes that Chubbs was the introduction. And just like that, Fif and Baka became major parts of OVO, with Drake referring to them multiple times in songs. To the world, these were just random shoutouts by Drake, but to the streets of Toronto, these guys were like mini King Vons. Especially Fif, as this guy, well, you'll see. He was definitely one of them ones, and unfortunately he was blamed for a very bad incident in the summer of 2017. July 23, 2017. It's a hot summer evening in Toronto, and a woman named Rochelle Lewis is celebrating her 28th birthday. To do this, she hosts a massive barbecue in her backyard with over 200 people in attendance. The barbecue goes well into the nighttime with good music, good vibes, and good food. That's until midnight when allegedly Fif shows up. While walking around the backyard, he allegedly sees somebody that he had recently gotten into an altercation with at the club. The specific man is sitting next to Rochelle with his arm around her as they're laughing together. Then out of nowhere, all they hear is bang.
2 men are dead and 1 woman is in serious condition at hospital following an early morning shooting in the Scarborough area in the Morningside and Shepherd area. Now, it's tough to imagine, but up until just a few moments ago, this was an active crime scene, and most of this block was entirely boarded off from media or even pedestrians and vehicle traffic coming through. Police have just removed the police tape, and they are now continuing with their very active investigation. They're looking for a suspect or suspects. Trouble is, they're not quite sure who they're looking for just yet.
She has since been upgraded to serious but stable condition.
The 2 deceased are 33-year-old Ronaldo Cole and 30-year-old Dwayne Campbell, both of Toronto. Both are known to police, although they won't say in what capacity. Now, we spoke with one of the owners of the home, and she confirmed that her daughter is the 3rd victim and remains in hospital. She didn't know the deceased, but police say they were invited to the party. She also didn't know how or why the shooting began. Police say they are still trying to gather those facts, too.
2 lives lost and Rochelle paralyzed for life, all for nothing. And unfortunately, despite there being over 100 witnesses, only 4 people came forward with descriptions, one of which being Rochelle herself. They described the man as darker skinned with a face tattoo, and that they heard that he had a recent altercation with the victims at a club. This, although a limited description, was a pretty good lead, and so I do believe that police would have eventually figured it out. But after this tragic incident, Drake's friend Fif was so hated that everyone wanted his head. And that takes us to September 14th, 2017. It's 2:30 in the morning in Reps Up G-Way territory, and Fif is hanging out in his project. In particular, he's hanging in the lobby with his friend on his building on Kennedy Road. Then at 2:45, 2 masked men in black hoodies walk inside the lobby. For whatever reason, Fif plays it no mind, as it's pretty regular to be walking around masked up in his hood. And just as he predicted, the men walk right by him and into the stairwell. The men then exit the building from the back after realizing that wait, that was Fif. So instantly they walk down the street to their white Ford Focus, grab their blicks, and return to the building. Then from outside the building, they start dumping at Fif. Bam! As Toronto police describe it, the incident was 100% targeted, even overkill, as they say that the suspects dumped over 50 times into Fif. This had to be revenge for something, and I think we know what that something was. Either way, this was a major blow to Drake, as he and Fif had become very close friends. And most importantly, this was yet another street war that Drake was now attached to. Pretty much all of his friends in Toronto had serious ops in the city and were destined for something to happen to them. Fifth was Drake's biggest crash out, so for something to happen to him meant that it could happen to anyone. Basically by association, Drake had inherited the ops of G-Way, GGG, and now Reps Up. All of the bloodshed in the city involving his friends, and sadly it didn't look like this could end anytime soon. So to all of you out there who thought that Drake's street lyrics were cap, I hope this video showed you that he had real situations in Toronto and many of his lyrics were actually real.
Hey, I'm gonna go ahead and end this thing right here. I'm scared. So with all this stuff going on, you think that any of this ties back to Drake? I don't know. Sometimes you be too close to the fire and get burnt. So prayers up to everybody involved, and pray these young kids, these young men that are crashing out, stop it, man. Hey, you guys see it for the first time, please like the video if you like videos like that. I thought it was pretty interesting because Drake the light skin, they always write him off, say he's soft, but this dude is writing with some real serious characters, so it's crazy. But please like the video, please join the family, subscribe to the channel, is absolutely free, and I look forward to have you guys join us. So till the next time, I'm gonna see you beautiful people. God bless. Peace.
They wish and they wish and they wish and they wish and they wish on me.